next with us, joining us now, Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal. Thank you very much, Senator, for being with us today.
Thank you.
I want to go back to the Middle East story because I know that you've been in touch with the father of one of the Israeli-American hostages, Segi Dekel-Shen, who has been, we don't know his status. Do you know anything more about his condition, his status, when he may be released?
All we know is that Segi Dekel-Shen is among the 33 hostages who are on the list to be released. We're praying and working for the fulfillment of the ceasefire agreement. Senator Cotton's absolutely right. America should hold Hamas to that agreement, support Israel in insisting that every single provision, it's a bipartisan agreement. I give President Trump a lot of credit, along with President Biden, for reaching it. And we need to keep our eye on the ball because this ceasefire agreement can lead to normalization, expansion of the Abraham Accords, and a united front against the real adversary here, which is Iran.
I want to ask you about something you've been pretty vocal on, which has been in the headlines this week, which are these presidential pardons. You've got a couple of things, potentially a bill to introduce that would force a president to explain what and why and how they're doing this, and even talking about offering up a constitutional amendment, which would limit the ability of a president to pardon or commute some of these sentences. I want to ask you about one case in particular because you know it well. You were Connecticut Attorney General when Adrian Peeler was convicted and on both state and federal charges, sent to prison. He was convicted in connection with the death of an 8-year-old little boy and his mom because they'd apparently been witnesses to another shooting. It changed the laws forever in Connecticut, and the fact that Adrian Peeler was commuted, his sentence by President Biden, it's being described as a miscarriage of justice, outrageous. You know the case very well. Have you gotten any indication from anyone connected to the Biden administration why he would have been commuted and will apparently be out this summer?
I have no explanation. And the decision in that case, frankly, was appalling to me. I was Attorney General of the state of Connecticut at the time that Adrian Peeler was convicted of murdering a witness, an 8-year-old boy who was about to testify in a drug case. It was a miscarriage of justice, and frankly, as appalling to me as the pardons for 1,500 rioters who assaulted brutally, causing serious injuries and some deaths to police. That decision by President Trump, I think, was equally, if not more, appalling to me. But the point here is that there have been mistakes on both sides. Democrat, Republican presidents, these decisions are made in the shadows. They're a black box. Nobody knows why that decision on Adrian Peeler was made. And many of these pardon decisions really cry out for more accountability and transparency. That's why I have introduced a bill. It's called the Pardon, Transparency, and Accountability Act that would establish some guardrails and require a justice impact statement, notification of the victims and to the prosecutors so they can express their opinion, an explanation required of the president, disclosure of any lobbying that has occurred in connection with that pardon decision. Now, as you know, the pardon power is absolute. It's one of those rare, maybe unique powers that has no checks or balances. The founders kind of incorporated from the English monarchy, and in order to really establish some safeguards and guardrails, we need a constitutional amendment.
So, and to be clear though, none of the 1,500 J6 people were charged with killing an officer. There was definitely violence against an officer that was charged, but just so we're clear on that point, there's also this issue of President Biden's pardons of his family members, literally minutes before he left and President Biden was sworn in. John Yoo writes about that over at Newsweek. He says, it's because he fears the very lawfare that he invented. These pardons were to Biden's own benefit, as their recipients are much less likely to disclose any information that directly implicate President Biden to the family's alleged, quote, pay to play 10% for the big guy schemes. There are Democrats who've questioned the wisdom of President Biden doing that on the way out the door. Would your proposals, either of them, limit a president's ability to pardon family members?
It would require the legislation that I've offered that the president provides some explanation, some accountability, some guardrails. But let's be very clear. I was critical, one of those Democrats who said to the president, no preemptive pardons. They're not required, and they violate the basic spirit of the pardon law. And I think what we need in the legislation, as well as ultimately a constitutional amendment, is greater transparency and accountability for the president so that Congress has a role. And like my state of Connecticut, there's a board of pardons and paroles that has specific criteria, outside judgment, and a kind of check and balance that the Constitution applies in other decisions. And while we're on the topic of transparency, just to add a note on the firing of inspectors general, Senator Cotton's absolutely right that the president has broad inherent power to fire officials in the executive branch. But with respect to inspectors general, there is a specific law that requires notice, 30 days, and a statement of reasons, substantive and detailed rationale. And that law plainly has not been complied with here. I challenge my Republican colleagues, many of them strong advocates of inspectors general, Senator Ernst and Grassley, who have been powerful and eloquent advocates of these watchdogs and bulwarks against corruption and waste, to speak out and join me in opposing these firings. And Elon Musk ought to be also joining, because he's against wasteful spending.
Which is often their assignment in these different agencies. So Senator Grassley, you mentioned him. He said there may be a good reason that they were fired, but we need to know that. He wants further explanation, he says, from President Trump. He said regardless, that 30-day detailed notice of removal that the law demands was not provided to Congress. I've talked to some other folks who are part of this caucus that you are a part of for the Inspector Generals. They sound like they have concerns as well. Are you confident, though, in your GOP colleagues? Because you have, Senator Grassley here speaking out. Do you think others will, too? This caucus is brand new that you guys have on the Inspectors General.
We formed this caucus because Inspectors General do controversial work. They say and blow the whistle when there has been abuse or waste or corruption. They're the bulwarks against that kind of wasteful spending. And that's the reason why our bipartisan caucus, I hope, will and must provide stronger support. And I'm disappointed in Republicans so far that they haven't spoken out. Many of these inspectors general have been very critical of Democratic administrations. I'm the ranking member on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Mike Missel, who is the Inspector General for the VA, was very critical of a number of decisions under the Biden administration of the VA. Michael Horowitz at Justice did a report that was very critical of a number of decisions under Democratic administrations. They are bipartisan, independent, and we need to preserve that support for them. I challenge my Republican colleagues and the president to reverse this decision.
Well, we've asked the White House, too, for more comments, so we'll see what we get on that front. Senator, thank you for making time to come in this morning.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.